What's up, guys? This is another crossover. I'm back with another episode of What If Naruto Was the Speed God Part 5. And if you did enjoy this video, give this video a like for the next part. And if you're new to my channel and like my content, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more crossover fictions with a twist. Now let's begin this new video.
11th chapter. Identity crisis. Well, then, we'll end the meeting here, Constantine stated as he formally terminated the Justice League Dark meeting. Before we go, I have a question, Richard Blood remarked. Where is our fearless leader? I've been wondering as well, Katana replied before turning to look at Zatanna, Cheshire, and Raven. You three were the last ones to see her. Your guess is as good as ours, Cheshire replied as she tinkered with a sigh. I haven't seen her since I found out she was a drug addict, Zatanna explained. Isn't there anything you can do to find her? Dead Man of Constantine inquired. I don't think so, Constantine responded after a moment of contemplation. She's been studying magic religiously since we first made contact, and I tried my most powerful tracking spell and couldn't find anything. Well, the Justice League, Young Justice, and Teen Titans are all looking for her as well, Raven explained. Have you ever considered that she might not want to be found? Blood inquired. She's going to kill herself, Zatanna snarled at Blood. We have to find her. Easier said than done, Blood replied as he sipped his tea. There might be a way to contact someone who knows where she is, Orchid stated as she arrived, holding fragments of a broken crystal. Rio sat in the dim light of her own apartment, holding a half-empty bottle of vodka and several open pill bottles on her nightstand. They tried to get her help after she confessed to doing drugs to the other members of Young Justice, but she swiftly bolted, using her money to go into hiding. She didn't have much with her because she had to move multiple times to avoid notice. She'd been using the little money she earned from various jobs to buy antidepressants, sleeping pills, and alcohol on the illicit market. Rio took a long breath before removing her top and allowing her hot body to calm off. She sat back down on the bed and closed her eyes, gazing up at the ceiling. Just a few moments later, she heard the echo of Savitar's laugh before turning on the TV. The initial attack was brief, but Metropolis was only granted a brief reprieve, the news said, and, despite Superman and the Justice League's intervention, there appears to be no end in sight. Rio sat in front of the TV, watching as the League members struggled to repel an onslaught of gigantic vines. The TV abruptly faded to static before showing the Joker's painted white face, banging on the camera he was staring at. Ignoring what Joker said, Rio watched as he flipped the camera to reveal his colleagues, which included Poison Ivy, Black Adam, Count Vertigo, Ultra Humanite, Atomic Skull, and Wotan. She hurled the remote through the TV and cupped her hands around her head. Rio turned to gaze at her old wedding band before stepping to the balcony to put her shirt back on. Before she plunged from the balcony and through a boom tube, the metal liquid poured out from under her suit, encasing her in her armor. The shaking stopped, and everyone peered around nervously. Please tell me that it didn't work, Blood whispered nervously as Zatanna covered her arm in bandages. I'd be lying if I said it didn't, an enraged Death replied from behind the far wall. Triple Bacon Cheeseburger, Constantine questioned as he swiftly grabbed a bag and laid it at Death's feet before fleeing. You're just lucky you got it from my favorite place, Death remarked, sitting on the floor and pulling the cheeseburger from the bag. Where's Rio? Cheshire inquired. Don't know, Death remarked as she took a bite. What do you mean you don't know? Raven inquired. She has a sigil carved into her flesh that prevents me from finding her, Death explained after swallowing. How she leaned about it, I don't know. Not even Reaper can find her. How could she vanish from your sight? Deadman wondered. You're Death. Very ancient magic, Death commented as she removed a fry from the bag. I thought every trace of it had been extinct. Now, I'm busy, so talk fast if there's anything else you need. This is getting us nowhere, Cheshire muttered as she drew a scythe from behind a chair. Thanks for returning that, Death replied as her scythe appeared next to her, surprising Jade. We figure you're one of the only people who can restore Rio's speed, Zatanna added as she took a step forward. Do you? Death asked, taking another bite of her burger. She's dying of speed sickness, Zatanna explained. I've heard, Death remarked with a dismayed expression toward the wall. And her hallucinations are destroying her psyche, Zatanna added. She's even resorted to drugs. Quit shuffling and deal, Death snarled at Zatanna. I want you to fix both of those problems with her, Zatanna stated confidently. Death appeared to think about this before staring at Constantine. No drink? She inquired. Constantine summoned a bottle of sake and hurriedly handed it to Death. Choose, Death said, uncorking the bottle. Huh? Zatanna inquired. Her speed or her sanity, Death remarked. I only help people once, not twice, and I require payment for it. Her sanity, Zatanna stated without hesitation, stunning everyone. I don't know how long she's been having these hallucinations, but if they're this bad, I don't know how long she'll last. I don't know how badly it's been damaged. It's flayed to the raw nerve, Death stated as she sucked the last of her burger. As Zatanna struggled to find the words to say, everyone looked around at how poor their leader's mind was. Well, is there any way you could hack the raw part off? She inquired, eager. Death sighed as she rose to her feet and took a drink of sake. You don't know how bad Naruto's mind is, Death chuckled as she walked past Zatanna. Her parents were killed in front of her and her wife was blown to atoms on their anniversary. What do you think the human psyche is? It's not the soul, but it's still delicate. It can be bludgeoned, tortured, but never broken like some people think. Not even by me. Well, there's gotta be something, Zatanna exclaimed. Maybe, Death replied as she handed Constantine the bottle. I can't erase her hell, but I can put it behind a wall. A wall? Raven inquired. In her mind, Death said, a dam to hold back the tide, closing the distance between her and Zatanna to an inch. Nasty, those memories. You haven't even seen the worst of what they'll do to her. Okay, Zatanna murmured uneasily, a wall, sounds good. But it's not permanent, Katana replied. Very good, Death said as she peeked over her shoulder at the swordswoman before returning her gaze to Zatanna. Nothing lasts forever. Well, I do, but... So, that's the choice, Zatanna inquired, Rio with no sanity, or Rio with some drywall that, if or when it collapses, she's done. Pretty much, Death responded. What's it going to be? Zatanna gazed at her hand as she raised it. What is this price she has to pay? Blood inquired. Her soul, Death replied nonchalantly. Everyone else in the room exclaimed, what? If she wants this for Naruto, it requires something of equal value to what she's asking for, Death stated as she turned to face them. Without this, your friend is as good as dead. Death looked surprised as Zatanna grabbed her hand. Deal, Zatanna answered solemnly. Death took Zatanna's hand in hers and waved it in front of her face. Zatanna staggered back as she felt something cold flow through her. As soon as Naruto is found, I'll put that wall up, Death remarked before raising her arms and revealing Zatanna the hazy ethereal chain that encircled them. Now, if you don't mind. Nibnu Ray, Zatanna said. Death flexed her hands as the link exploded into a shower of particles. Death had vanished, along with the sake bottle Constantine was clutching, and everyone blinked and glanced about. When a boom tube opened up to his left and Moon Knight jumped through, kicking both him and Poison Ivy away, Ultra Humanite took aim at Robin and Miss Martian. Miss Martian and Robin were able to flee after the plants that bound them released. When Moon Knight got between them as Robin rushed into the jungle, Poison Ivy stepped up to stop him. As she immediately made numerous hand gestures and blew out a ball of fire at Ivy, the lower portion of her mask retracted. Moon Knight jumped through the burst of flames and kicked Ivy hard in the chest, but Ivy defended herself. Moon Knight jumped through a boom tube and landed on Wotan, causing him to lose his spell as she smacked him in the skull. She charged Ultra Humanite, her fist tearing through his rifle and throwing the simian back several yards, landing quietly on one knee. When did you get here? Shouted Superboy. Moon Knight disregarded him and jumped through a boom tube between Kid Flash, Count Vertigo, and Black Adam. Moon Knight, who was holding her own against the ancient Egyptian, grabbed Black Adam's arm and tossed him into Count Vertigo. Moon Knight looked off to the side before jumping into another boom tube and appearing in front of Atomic Skull to intercept the energy beam thrown from his helmet at Robin and Miss Martian. Enough, shouted Wotan as he took to the sky. He sprayed lightning at everyone, forcing them to fall as he used a force field to block Robin's exploding throwing stars. Moon Knight caught a sight of Aqualad grabbing a duffel bag from Miss Martian's bioship before knocking the lightning that was holding her down away and sprinting toward the Atlantean. Taking the helmet of fate from Calder's grasp, she hastily removed her hood and replaced it. Dr. Fate stood in the marsh, staring up at Wotan, after a dazzling flash of light. Fate blasted a beam at Wotan as he flew through the air, sending him crashing into the Injustice League's headquarters, the beam transforming into energy chains. Salvo quad reverto, said Wotan as the chains that bound him shattered. He then directed the chains at Fate, who destroyed them with a flick of her wrist. I hear you can suppress Nabu, Wotan remarked, flying up to Fate's level, but that won't help you against me, Fulmina Venite. Wotan was shooting magical energy from his hands when Fate simply grabbed the strike with her own hand. Wotan angrily launched additional assaults before Fate launched her own. Wotan vanished after absorbing the attack and reappeared behind her. Just as Wotan was about to launch his next strike, a barrier materialized around Moon Knight, who calmly turned to face Wotan. I'll kill you, said Wotan. Eckert's NATO WNWOD, exclaimed Zatanna as Wotan fell. When the Justice League came, Fate ignored them and took several long breaths. Savitar's laughter reverberated in her ears as Fate held her hand up as Joker began ranting. Everyone glanced at Fate as the clown prince of crime gagged as he felt something clutching his throat. Miss Martian yelled, "Rio, stop," as Fate ignored her. Fate appeared out of nowhere and lowered her hand as Joker slumped senseless into the ocean. With a flash of light, Fate removed her helmet, and Moon Knight flung it toward Calder. "Rio, just let us help you," exclaimed Robin, taking a step forward as Moon Knight switched to a boom tube. "No one can help me," Moon Knight grumbled as she passed through the boom tube and vanished. Reaper, who had been watching from a distance, drew Artemis's attention and signaled for her to follow him. "I'll be right back," Artemis promised Green Arrow as she pursued Reaper. Artemis paused a few yards away in a clearing with Reaper and growled at him. "What exactly do you want?" she inquired. "My mistress is looking for her," Reaper stated raspily. "She recently made a deal with someone to save her sanity, and she needs the location of your friend." "Well, in case you missed everything, she apparently doesn't want any help dealing with this," Artemis grumbled. "That's where you're wrong," Reaper responded. "Naruto believes everything that happened with Savitar is her fault. You must persuade her that it isn't." "And just how do we do that?" Artemis inquired. "The girl she's close with," Reaper explained before disappearing into the darkness. "The girl she's close with," Artemis wondered, "does he mean Jade?" Moon Knight's armor withdrew behind her shirt as she collapsed weary on the bed. She sighed when she reached for a bottle and discovered it was empty. She flipped her hood as she exited the apartment complex and walked through the desolate streets before entering a boom tube and exiting on a beach. Rio went along the beach before reaching a Metropolis, looking back at the deserted island hamlet she called home. Rio made her way to a little convenience store and grabbed some strong sake in the back as the city's residents began their day. She heard shouts from the front of the store while looking through some tiny food products and peered around an aisle to see a man holding up the cashier. Rio grumbled and approached the gunman from behind, grabbing him by the back of his shirt. Before Rio could pay for the sake, the gunman was sent falling through the store's front window. Rio tried to block out the noise of the man she had thrown through the glass when she had had enough. She placed her drink down and tossed a stone at the man's head, knocking him out cold. Meanwhile, Artemis sat calmly in her Gotham bedroom, racing through what she had discussed with Reaper. A girl Rio's close to, she pondered, it could be Jade, but they broke up weeks ago. Artemis groaning in frustration, she tried to relax by covering her head with a pillow. "I just wish those things with Savitar hadn't happened," she lamented, because Rio wouldn't be like this if it hadn't been for him. A light bulb flashed out in her thoughts as she went through everything from their fights with Savitar. "That's it," she exclaimed as she rose to her feet. Artemis dashed out the door, into an alley, and dialed a number in an ancient phone booth. "Artemis B07 has been identified." As Artemis approached the Zeta Beam platform, Connor, Megan, and Calder panted. "Artemis, what are you doing here so late at night?" Megan inquired. "That girl," Artemis whispered between heaving breaths, "the girl Savitar took that one time." "What about her?" Connor inquired. "Rio would always leave during training and stuff to go see her, right?" Artemis speculated. "We could use her to find Rio." "We already tried that," Calder explained. She said Rio hadn't seen her since before her Titan's mission in Taiwan. "But Rio cares about her," Artemis reasoned. "She treats her with more concern than herself. If she talked to Rio, then she could convince Rio to get help." Megan realized before striking her forehead. "Hello, Megan." "But we still need to find her," Connor replied before the cave's computer beeped. Everyone stared as a map of the planet with countless other dots emerged in front of them after pulling up a screen. "What is this?" Artemis inquired. "I programmed the cave's computer to place a marker whenever there's a potential sighting of Rio," Calder stated as he checked the computer. This time, it was in Nagasaki, Japan. "Calder, isolate Japan, please," Artemis murmured, a notion flashing across her mind as Calder did as she asked. "Now, isolate cases where the individual was male." A surprising number of dots vanished, leaving barely a few hundred. "Now, only show ones where there have been strange incidents either before, during, or after the sightings," Artemis instructed. The algorithm limited the results again, leaving them with only 5 locations along Japan's southern coast. "Why did you have Calder narrow down the results like that?" Connor inquired. "Because most sightings were in East Asia," Artemis stated. "Then there's Rio's gender, followed by her sense of justice, as she used to be a police detective on her Earth." "So, one of these sightings must be related to Rio," cried Megan. "I'll send word to Wally, Robin, and the Titans to each check out these locations," Calder remarked through the cave's bug. "You got that?" Cheshire of Katana asked, nodding and proceeding through an ethereal gateway. Cheshire took out her cell phone and dialed a number while holding it up to her ear. "Hey," she stated solemnly, "we've got a location." Rio sat down after returning to her flat via boom tube to skip the long journey home. She sipped sake and took a couple of pain relievers before thinking about the other members of Young Justice. "Who are you?" she wondered before attempting to sleep. That evening, "Are we sure she'll be here?" Starfire wondered as she stood with Calder and Wally on the island of Hashima. "This is the only other option," Calder explained. "Besides, no tourists are allowed here at night, and it's close to where the last sighting was." "I'll go take a look around," Wally stated before collapsing into an imaginary wall. Wally nursed his nose as he staggered back, grunting. "She's fine," Wally assured. "Impressive," Constantine commented as he walked past the young heroes to inspect the barrier. "I haven't seen a barrier this strong in a long time." "How did you get here?" Starfire inquired. "I was actually looking for our little friend as well," Constantine revealed as he extracted a wooden stick from his jacket. Constantine walked down the street after stabbing it in the barrier, which shattered. Everyone followed him as he led them to an old building and up to the top floor. Constantine knocked on the door of a room at the end of the hall and waited. "How do you even know she's going to be here?" Wally said before the door was opened by a filthy and hungry Rio. "I knew I should have put up some more spells besides that barrier," Rio admitted as she returned inside. "What happened to you?" Starfire inquired. "Everything," the distant Rio remarked as she grabbed her bottle of sake and drank heavily from it. "Did you know that I'm not able to die?" "What?" Wally asked, perplexed by the question. "I can't die," Rio stated unequivocally. "The first time I came here, I jumped from the balcony and woke up on the ground several hours later." "But how is that possible?" Calder wondered. "You'd have to ask Death," Rio lamented as she sat at the table. "Just leave me alone." "We can't do that," Starfire remarked. "Why not?" Rio questioned, keeping her gaze away from them. "And don't say it's because I'm your friend. I've been hearing Savitar's voice for so long I can't remember who you guys are." "Fine," Calder said, nodding to Wally. "We'll leave, but there's someone who needs to speak with you first." Rio closed her eyes and held her head in shame as Savitar's face raced through her mind. "Naruto?" inquired a young girl's familiar voice. Rio halted when she heard the voice and turned to see Mina standing on crutches with Crypto beside her, standing with everyone. "These people said you were feeling sick," Mina stated as she approached Rio. "Are you okay?" "Why did you bring her here?" Rio snarled at Calder. "She's not supposed to leave the hospital." "I came because they said you needed help but didn't want any," Mina explained. "You have to go with them." "I can't," Rio sobbed. "I killed all those innocent people. I killed Johnny. I killed my ex-wife. I killed my parents." "But that's okay," Mina continued, "because I just found out a few days ago that I only have a few weeks left, and you know what? I just smiled because I had my best friend to talk to." Rio was surprised when she hugged her. "But now, my best friend needs help," Mina continued to hug Rio, "and I'll be with her every step of the way until she is all better." "But how can I even look at myself after I did all of those things?" Rio wondered, trying to stop crying. "I don't know what you mean," Mina remarked as she grabbed Rio's hand in hers, "but I'll do whatever I can to help you get better." Rio finally stopped crying and glanced at her friends after a few minutes of letting the hug sink in. I think I'm ready to try," Rio admitted uneasily. "Excellent," Death murmured as she appeared across the table. Everyone turned to look at her as they heard her voice. "What are you doing here?" Starfire inquired. "Holding up my end of the bargain," Death remarked, taking a sip of sake before looking square into Rio's eyes. "Now, Naruto, I'm going to put up a barrier inside your mind." "A what?" Rio inquired. "It might sting a little, but please don't tap on the glass," Death said, "because you're not going to like what comes around." Death reached out 2 fingers and touched just between Rio's eyes, causing them to roll back up within her head. When Constantine put a barrier between them, the heroes sought to stop Death by shaking almost violently. "What are you doing?" said Wally. "Just wait," Constantine murmured calmly as Rio's seizing gradually ceased, leaving only her chest moving up and down to signal she was breathing. "She'll wake up in about a week," Death stated as she rose up, holding the bottle of sake in her hand, before glancing down at Mina and saying, "I'll see you soon." Death vanished as everyone blinked. Earth 1. Death appeared in a nursery and looked down at the 2 sleeping babies in the cot. Death murmured a tune she hadn't hummed in a long time as she brushed their cheeks, her eyes wet. "Don't worry," Death murmured, her lip quivering, "Daddy will be back soon." In their sleep, the 2 babies grasped Death's hand and cuddled the fingers. Death eventually broke down in tears before leaving the room. Earth 9. Death entered an auto shop garage and approached a man working on the bottom of a car. Death inhaled deeply and cleared her throat. "Be with you in a second," the man said. "I'd rather it be now." "Brother," Death whispered uncomfortably, her voice tinged with guilt. The man came to a halt, pushing himself out from behind the automobile to display Death his gruff and unshaven face. "What are you doing here?" he questioned, rising and walking up to his workbench. "I need a favor," Death remarked as she followed the man. "I need you to head to Earth-16 and watch someone for me. After what you and the others did to me," grumbled the man as he began working on a small RC car. "Fat chance." "Please, destruction," Death whispered, holding the pain inside her heart. "Just this once, and then I'll leave you alone." "And why should I?" Destruction began as he turned around, but paused as he noticed she was crying. "You fell in love, didn't you?" Destruction moaned in defeat as Death remained mute. "What's their name?" Destruction inquired. "Earth 1 week later 1. Rio yawned as she entered the cave's kitchen and pulled seemingly every bit of food from storage. An hour later, almost everyone on Young Justice returned to find Rio had eaten almost everything. "You're awake," screamed Miss Martian as she flew over to hug her pal. "Best sleep I've gotten in a long time," Rio smiled. "How are you feeling?" Wally said. "No more visions of Savitar." "All gone," Rio replied as she grabbed an ear of corn and began munching. "Well, once you're back to full health, we'll get you back into training," Calder remarked. "Sounds good," Rio replied as she picked her teeth as everyone else went. She gave a wicked smile to her reflection in the empty plate as her eyes flashed with white lightning. Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, was getting ready for the day in the apartment she shared with her father when the doorbell rang. "Barbara," said Commissioner Gordon from outside the apartment, "I accidentally left the house key inside last night." "I'm coming," Barbara said as she approached the door. "You need to start remembering these things, or I'm going to have to start making fun of your age." She opened the door, and before she could respond, she felt a searing pain in her belly as she flew back and slammed through a table. "I do love tabletop editions," stated the Joker's voice as Barbara's vision blurred. Barbara felt someone tearing her garments before passing out due to excruciating discomfort between her legs. "Oh dear," the person muttered as they adjusted a collar around their neck, changing the voice from Joker's to Barbara's. "Let's just call dear old dad to come check on us." The guy waited while pulling Barbara's phone from her pocket and dialing a number while on speaker. "I'm on my way home, Barbara," Commissioner Gordon stated. "Dad, someone just broke into the house," exclaimed the terrified person before firing the revolver and ended the conversation. The intruder laughed maniacally as they battered and bruised Barbara, then closed the door behind them, leaving a trail of white lightning behind them. Aquaman swam into his small son's room when he was knocked back by a bolt of white lightning. He looked up, bewilderment on his face soon turning to wrath when he spotted a translucent box with a tiny and severely burned infant inside. Lady Shiva was walking down a dark street after finishing a work when she was lured into an alley by a streak of white lightning. She grunted as she was thrown against a brick wall and looked up to see who had attacked her. A flash of white lightning erupted out of her hand as she pulled out a sigh. "Why are you so hostile, Shiva?" inquired the all-too-familiar voice. "Impossible," Shiva muttered, looking into the piercing blue eyes that fluttered with white lightning. "It took a while, but I finally did it," Savitar stated as he emerged from the shadows. As she took in Savitar's new appearance, Shiva's expression changed to one of incredulity. After signing a pact with Shiva, Reaper vanished into a puff of smoke from above. From the void, Reaper went through the sandstorm before appearing at a library similar to the one in the House of Mystery. After passing numerous other inhabitants, Reaper approached Death, who was engaged in some sort of game that Reaper didn't identify. "Yes?" Death asked, as there was a small explosion on the board. Rio entered the cave's main center to discover the members of Young Justice looking startled as Batman and Captain Marvel assisted Martian Manhunter to the back. "What happened while I was sleeping?" Rio wondered. "We were in the middle of a training exercise with our minds linked, but we almost died for real," Calder explained. "I see," Rio remarked. "I never got to ask you, Calder, is it true that someone murdered Aquaman's son?" The entire team was stunned by this news, and they all turned to stare at Calder, who closed his eyes and remained silent in grief. "How?" Artemis wondered. "They're underwater." His Majesty was struck by a bolt of lightning before he saw what had happened, Calder explained. "The young prince was killed via suffocation before being given third-degree burns post-mortem." "That's terrible," McGann replied sympathetically. "When did this take place?" Robin inquired, cautiously. "A couple of days ago," Calder replied. "Why do you ask?" "It's just. Something similar happened to both Batman and I," Robin explained. Batgirl was nearly killed when a bullet passed through her spine and paralyzed her. Are you kidding me? Wally inquired. No, Robin answered, shaking his head. Batgirl was also molested and severely bruised all over her body, and the only clue we have to the identity of the attacker is that she heard the Joker's voice. But isn't he still locked up in Arkham Asylum? Superboy inquired. Exactly, Robin responded. This makes no sense, and it happened right around the time Aquaman's son was killed. Kansu see anything during that time, Rio? McGann inquired. Not that I know of, Rio replied, folding her arms and contemplating. I'll see if the Teen Titans can learn anything about this mess. Oh, you don't have to do that, a man with a plaid shirt, trousers, and a scruffy beard said as he arrived at the cave's entrance. Everyone jumped away from the man and took up combat positions. Who are you? Exclaimed Wally. The name's Destruction, the man replied, pointing to each of them individually, and you could all use a good nap. All members of the team, including Wolf, went unconscious when Reaper materialized next to Destruction. Now it's your turn, Destruction remarked as he turned and vanished into thin air. Reaper walked to the center of the team's circle before sitting down and meditating. From Dream World, everyone rose from the ground and gazed out at the deserted Metropolis surrounding them. Where are we? McGann inquired. London, Rio murmured, her head bowed. Feels like I have a hangover. How did we get here? Wally wondered. Where's that guy? He's not your concern right now, Reaper stated as he approached the group. What are you doing here? Artemis questioned, drawing an arrow on Reaper. Instead of speaking, Reaper pulled out a gun and fired at the team. Scattering, Superboy attempted to punch Reaper but instead passed through him. Calder attempted to encapsulate Reaper in the water he had gathered from the Thames, but Reaper stopped him by firing his pistols through the water, scattering it. Wally sprinted around Reaper but halted almost immediately to take cover from the quick rounds coming from Reaper's firearms as they appeared through the smoke Reaper had created to escape being hit. McGann's eyes sparkled as she extended her hands to Reaper. Grunting, Reaper reassembled and dropped on all fours. You've lost, Reaper, Rio remarked, pointing her bow and arrow at him. Everyone was perplexed when Reaper began to chuckle. What do you have to laugh about? Superboy inquired. You didn't hit any of us. Who said I was trying to hit you? Reaper questioned, raising his head and looking past the squad. Following his gaze, they noticed numerous breaches in reality caused by dozens of bullet holes. A figure dressed in white and emitting gold lightning broke through space and landed on one knee. Standing up, Godspeed looked around the room before locking his gaze on Rio. Give me back my body, Godspeed commanded before disappearing with Rio in a flash of gold lightning. What just happened? Wally wondered as the crack from which Godspeed had appeared suddenly mended itself. I'll explain as soon as the Martian releases me, Reaper stated. McGann freed Reaper, who stood up and took off his mask. Let's just sit down for a moment, Reaper suggested as they all emerged in a coffee shop, coffees on a table in the center of them. What was that? Artemis inquired. I shifted where we were, Reaper stated as he sat down, his garments changed with an outfit similar to Superboy's before sipping his coffee. Anything can happen in the dream world. Dream world? Calder inquired. So, we're asleep? Yes and no, Reaper answered as he sipped his coffee. You're all technically in a trance to bring you all here, but you can't die here, so just enjoy yourselves. Everyone took their seats, then gazed down at their mugs. Robin took his and drank gently from it. It's good, he declared. Everyone else began to drink before Artemis stared Reaper in the eyes. What exactly did we see back there? She inquired. You saw Naruto fighting Savitar, Reaper explained as he sipped another beer. But that wasn't Savitar, Wally pointed out. Savitar is a giant guy in metal armor. Reaper sighed and stared at McGann and Calder. What did you two see? He inquired. I saw that speedster that. McGann started before realizing what she was about to say. Savitar is Rio's doppelganger. Exactly, Reaper agreed, much to everyone's surprise. What's a doppelganger? Wally inquired. They're beings from another world who look exactly like us but aren't, Calder revealed. You all know how smart Naruto is, Savitar said, so it's safe to assume Savitar is just as astute. But why would Savitar attack Rio now? Robin wondered. He didn't, Calder answered, realizing what was happening. Rio attacked Savitar. Everyone looked about before returning their gaze to Reaper. But wasn't Savitar dealt with by the Teen Titans? Artemis inquired. When Naruto was the Black Flash, Savitar had imprinted a portion of himself inside her, Reaper continued. That's what caused Naruto to have all those visions and nightmares that drove her down that dark path. So, we've been living with Savitar the whole time? Robin inquired. Yes, Reaper confirmed. But wouldn't Death's Wall have stopped him from taking over her body? Wally was questioned. Mistress had to tear down the rest of Naruto's sanity before building that wall, Reaper stated, adding that Savitar used that instant to gain control with Naruto being placed behind that wall. What I did was do enough damage to the wall for Naruto to burst through. But how does she have her speed? Magan wondered. As I said, this is the dream world, Reaper remarked as they emerged on the ceiling. Anything can happen here. We'll stop Savitar before he wakes up. However, Savitar is aware of this and is seeking for a route out other than me letting him out. Well, couldn't Savitar just will a door to appear? Wally wondered. No, Reaper replied, the spell I cast requires him to find a specific core memory from Naruto in order to find the way out. The key to escaping is to destroy that fundamental memory. Then what are we waiting for? Superboy jumped up and said, let's go find Savitar and stop him. Easier said than done, Reaper stated as they returned to the floor. This dream world is primarily Naruto's memories, and as such, we must go back to each of his core memories to find the one he's at with Savitar. Let's get going, then, Artemis stated as they all stood up, Reaper sighing. I can't even finish a cup of coffee, he thought to himself as he replaced his mask. Let us be off then. Going up to a door, Reaper opened it, allowing a blinding light to surround them all. Returned to the real world, Batman entered the cave's main hub and paused when he saw Reaper meditating in the middle of the sleeping members of Young Justice. I wouldn't disturb them if I were you, Destruction muttered as he materialized next to Batman, who was about to rouse them up. You'll doom us all. Before Destruction could sigh, Batman jumped away from him and into a fighting position. This isn't the time for us to fight, Destruction murmured, leaning against the wall. The fate of the entire multiverse depends on them stopping Savitar now. But Savitar is trapped in the Speed Force, Batman said as he rose from his stance. A piece of him is inside that young girl, Destruction remarked as he and Batman looked at Rio, and if she wakes up with Savitar in control, no one will be able to stop him. What is your connection to Moon Knight anyway? Batman inquired. My sister is an acquaintance of hers and has asked me to keep an eye on her, Destruction explained as he moved deeper into the cave. I'm going to make some coffee, would you like some? From Dream World, Young Justice and Reaper members stood on a hill outside of central Metropolis as a tornado approached the Metropolis. They stood there watching as Godspeed detonated the speed bomb in his grasp, the resultant blast devastating everything in its path. Godspeed battled to stay upright as his suit tore and regenerated before he drew the explosion into his body, reforming everything around him. He suddenly vanished in an instant as a massive ring of golden lightning shot up the tornado. Following a bolt of lightning, the members of Young Justice returned to the coffee shop with Reaper. So, that was Rio's final moments before coming to our Earth, Wally explained. It would seem so, Reaper remarked as he sat back down in his chair and removed his mask. Naruto has always had this sense of responsibility that he needs to fight for everyone. He forces himself to accept every vice he has committed and to push his body to its limits. Reaper took another drink of his coffee and gazed deeply into the dark roast inside the cup. What you're seeing is something Naruto keeps mostly to himself, he explained. Back on our Earth, Naruto rarely spoke at all after his parents were murdered by Savitar. I was Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto's first friend and opponent, before I became the entity you now know as Reaper. You know Rio? Robin inquired. I know Naruto, Reaper answered calmly, but Rio, as you call her, is a total stranger to me. I'm going to tell you everything I know about Naruto. Aren't they the same person, though? Magan was questioned. The person you know as Rio is happy, caring, and devoted to her friends, Reaper explained, whereas the person I know as Naruto is depressed, detached from reality, and keeps to herself. That's a complete 180, Superboy exclaimed. That's because you don't really know him, Reaper explained as he sipped more of his limitless coffee. Everything changed that night Savitar murdered his parents. He became the person I recall. When a strong gust of wind and a crackling of electricity reached their ears, the door flew open, blinding everyone. They were then inside a house, near to a body, while white and gold lightning circled a woman with long red hair, while a young child with blonde hair looked on in horror. Mommy! Cried the boy, his eyes welling up. The woman cried, Naruto, run! A few moments later, the Young Justice members recognized whose memory they were in and watched in terror. While Savitar stabbed the woman in the abdomen, the young Naruto vanished. Savitar then raced away, letting her body fall to the ground. Shouldn't this memory have ended already? Questioned Calder when his question was answered by Godspeed, who was hurrying to the woman's side while wearing a cloak with the hood up. Hey, Godspeed whispered as he gently embraced her, you're going to be okay. Please, the mother pleaded as she began to lose strength while crying, my husband, my son, are they? Godspeed withdrew his hood, and his mask crumbled to reveal his face. "It's me, Mom," Naruto screamed out, "your little speedster is here." "I'm sorry, Naruto," the woman replied as she extended her hand to him. "It's all right, Mom," Naruto told her as he continued to cry, "I'll be right here." "Naruto," the woman began to lose her breath, "I love you." "I love you, too, Mom," Naruto murmured, taking the woman's hand and pulling her into a loving hug. Naruto sobbed into her hair as the woman became limp. He remained like that for a moment before stifling his tears and repositioning his mother, her hand in her husband's. He glanced at them for a moment before flicking up his hood and disappearing, his mask reappearing. Reaper was now munching a muffin as the members of Young Justice returned to the coffee shop. "Before you all say anything, that was a memory," he explained, adding, "it would be the most important memory that Naruto has where the exit is." "So, that time after Rio fought Savitar in Metropolis, she went back to save her mother but didn't do it," Magan explained. As someone who grew up surrounded by knowledge of the Speed Force, Naruto knew the risks of changing the time stream, Reaper explained as he tossed a muffin to each of them. By changing it, he could have caused a flashpoint on his Earth. "Flashpoint?" Wally inquired. "A year ago, your Barry Allen went back in time and saved his mother from Reverse Flash," Reaper nonchalantly remarked. "It drastically altered the timeline, but he changed it back before any long-term damage could occur." "So, Rio gave up saving her mother in order to stay with us?" Calder inquired. When speaking to his Barry Allen after Savitar returned a few weeks ago, Naruto revealed to him that he felt like he had a place he belonged since before that night, Reaper explained as he sat back down. "But Naruto feels as if he was born here." The door swung open, blinding everyone. They were in an empty playground when they noticed Naruto sitting on the swings, staring at the ground while it rained. Artemis moved closer to him, but Reaper stopped her and pointed to Naruto. A young Indian girl approximately his age approached him and placed an umbrella over both of them. With a blank expression and a little twist of his head, Naruto gazed over his shoulder at the girl. "You looked cold," the girl observed. Naruto then stood up and headed over to a bench, but the girl followed him to keep him dry. "I'm Mina," the girl smiled, "Mina Dewan." When the members of Young Justice heard this, they looked between themselves before returning to Naruto, who was constantly playing on the playground as the rain continued to fall while Mina tried to keep him dry. They were back in the coffee shop after another burst of light. "Was that girl?" Robin wondered. "That was Mina Dewan of Earth 1, Reaper explained, later known as Mina Uzumaki, Naruto's wife. "Wife?" asked Wally, surprised. "The day before he stopped Dr. Carver, she was killed when she unknowingly used a toned-down version of a speed bomb," Reaper explained. "So, Rio goes to see that girl in the hospital because she's the doppelganger of his wife," Artemis explained. "When are we going to find Savitar and Rio?" raged Superboy. "We've done nothing but go through Rio's memories and haven't even found a single trace of her." "Connor," Magan expressed concern. "I have to admit that this is getting a little tiring as well," Calder said, "but we have to find an exit and stop Savitar." Reaper sighed and sat his muffin before heading to the door. "When I opened it again, there was no light because there was only a brick wall behind it." Reaper walked through the brick wall before leaping out the other side. Reaper pushed himself up and returned to his muffin. "That's where the exit is, and good luck trying to get through," Reaper stated as he resumed eating. "What was that?" Robin inquired. "It was Naruto's most precious memory, so he sealed it off in case anyone tried to access it," Reaper stated. "Not even I have the power to unlock it." "But there has to be something we can do," Superboy stated before punching the brick wall and flying against the opposite side of the room. "There's only one option," Reaper stated, looking over his shoulder. "You two can come out now." They all turned to see a little child who appeared to be approximately the same age as Naruto in their last memory, as well as a female who appeared to be a bit younger with dark blue hair. "What do you people want?" the boy demanded fiercely. "How did you get here?" Wally inquired as he approached the pair, only to be punched in the face by the boy. "Just leave us alone," the child shouted as he scowled at each of them. "It's bad enough that we had to put up with that maniac for weeks, but you all just made it worse." "Those are the split personalities that Naruto acquired when he made the contract with that moon god," Reaper stated as he approached the two and knelt down on one knee. "We need you both to unlock that last memory for us so we can help Naruto." "And why should we trust any of you?" shouted the child. "You've all done nothing but make Naruto unhappy since he arrived in this world. None of you are going to let him be who he wants." "How have we been making Rio miserable?" Calder inquired. "None of you notice how stressed out he's been with everything going on?" shouted the boy back. "You all coerced him to join your small group. You wouldn't let him fight Savitar until you all pushed him to pretend to kidnap that Martian girl. You expect him to manage another team on his own. You all even forced him to attempt to improve. Didn't it occur to any of you that he might not want to be saved? He likes it on this new Earth, but Naruto can't accomplish what he really wants because of all of you. He only wishes to be normal. The teenager took deep breaths as the members of Young Justice were taken aback by the revelation of the guy they thought they knew. And now he has to deal with the fact that Savitar used his body to paralyze a girl and kill a baby, all because you wouldn't let him be who he wants to be. The child tried to calm himself. Megan approached them as Reaper stood up. "We're sorry about all of that," she said. "We were just doing what we thought Rio would want. But if that's the case, we won't get in her way any longer. None of you will ever understand how much pain Naruto has been in his entire life," the boy explained. "He gave up an entire life to become someone he didn't want to be. What guarantee do we have that you'll keep your pledge if we let you through to that memory?" "We don't know," Robin admitted, "but we all care about Rio. Not simply as a team member, but she's become like family to us. We won't try to stop her if she doesn't want to be a hero. We'll all do our part to make sure she can spend the rest of her life how she wants," Calder stated as he moved forward, "but if she doesn't want it, we can deal with that as long as she's happy." The girl tapped the lad on the shoulder, and he looked at her. The lad sighed as she nodded. A hexagonal design developed over his hand as he held it toward the door, then shatter. "Don't make us regret this," the boy pleaded as he and the girl walked away. Everyone exchanged glances before nodding and leaping through the brick wall. Rio was staring at Godspeed as they stood in front of a spinning gateway, with Rio's back to it. "Rio!" screamed Robin as he and the other members approached Godspeed. "Well, if it isn't my old friends," Rio replied with a nasty grin. "Drop the act, Savitar," said Artemis, aiming square between Rio's eyes. Rio sighed and transformed into a man. Rio, smirking at them. "I must say, you all are so deafeningly dia. My original plan was to frame this stupid girl for the crimes and then murder you all, but I guess I'll just have to settle for getting out of here and killing your sleeping bodies. Wally, you and Sasuke are fighting with me against Savitar," Godspeed stated, his attention fixed on the wicked speedster. "Break the final barrier around the exit portal, the rest of you. There's a friend outside who has been asking to talk to Savitar. The impacts of the world, however, do not function on it, thus you will have to do it by hand." "Got it," Superboy said as they all maintained a careful eye on Savitar. Godspeed's hands were clenched as Savitar's armor appeared around him. "Let's do this," Godspeed stated as he, Wally, and Savitar sprinted away, with Reaper following in his smoke form while the rest ran toward the gateway. Running through the trees, Savitar led Godspeed, the newly outfitted Kid Flash, and the smoky Reaper. He hacked through two trees with the blades that extended from his arms to obstruct them, but Wally slid under them, Godspeed vaulted over them, and Reaper went around. Savitar spun and flew into the skies, shooting lightning onto the ground, knocking the following speedsters off their feet and scattering Reaper. As Megan and Robin stood guard, Superboy banged on the invisible barrier surrounding the portal, while Calder slammed his water hammers into it. Out of nowhere, Savitar arrived and knocked them all away from the doorway. Grabbing Megan by the neck, he sent lightning into her, forcing her to scream in agony. Savitar prepared to stab her with his vibrating hand when Godspeed split in two and ran at him, the clone pulling Megan out of his hands and the original phasing into Savitar's suit and knocking him out. Savitar fell flat on his face and glanced at Godspeed, who was in his armor for a brief minute before he shattered it. He then stood up, stunned by his own body. "I took away your speed and used a spell to seal off this world's powers from you," Godspeed remarked. "It's all over for you, Savitar. What are you going to do?" Savitar asked cockily as Wally and Reaper joined the rest of Young Justice. "We are so intertwined inside here that if you kill me, you'll die as well, and we'll both be revived." "I'm not going to lay another finger on you," Godspeed remarked as the air around the portal appeared to fracture. "I'll leave it to someone who really wants to speak with you." An all too familiar roar from Artemis reached everyone's ears, while Savitar's expression was filled with fear. As a black streak trailed by red lightning ran out of the portal and next to Godspeed, the seal around it shattered. Savitar took a step back and turned to run, but the black flash was there in a heartbeat and stabbed him in the chest with his hand. Savitar looked pale and staggered back after taking a deep breath. Looking down at his hands, he noticed that he was disintegrating from his fingers to his feet. He yelled as his head disintegrated, rejoining Godspeed and his clone. "Stay where you belong," Godspeed whispered as his suit left him as Rio, in my memories. The black flash came to a halt in front of Rio and growled before fleeing. "He got a pretty quick replacement for me," Rio commented as everyone approached. Is it really you? Calder inquired. Rio approached Robin and peered into his sunglasses. Your real name is Richard Grayson, she began before approaching McGann. You're a white Martian, she added before turning to face Wally. You're an ass. I'm convinced, Wally replied as Rio entered the portal. What kind of memory is this? Robin of Reaper wondered as he and Wally rejoined the team. Reaper pointed behind Batman's student to two folks witnessing a meteor shower. They say that when you see a shooting star, you can make a wish on it, Kushina stated before glancing down at Naruto. What exactly did you wish for, Naruto? I wish you'd become the greatest scientist in the world, Mommy, exclaimed Naruto, a cute 5-year-old with a toothy grin. Kushina grinned, then reached behind her back. I have something to give you, she slyly smiled, close your eyes and no peeking. Naruto closed his eyes eagerly as Kushina took out a small green gem on a rope necklace and placed it around Naruto's neck. You can open your eyes now, Kushina remarked. Naruto did this before looking down at the jewelry. I got that especially for you, Kushina remarked as she drew Naruto into a tight hug. Happy birthday, Naruto. Naruto wrapped his arms around his mother and hugged her tightly. Returned to the real world, Rio awoke with a grunt and sat up, staring into Batman's eyes. Destruction told me everything, Batman stated as he drew some batarangs. Which are you? Well, since I haven't killed everyone yet, I'm going to say I'm the real Rio, Rio stated as she stood up and made her way toward the exit. Once we find out about this mysterious group that manipulates the world from the shadows, I'm resigning from everything. With that, a boom tube appeared, and Rio entered it as the others began to awaken. Where's Rio? McGann inquired as she rose to her feet. She went to start her shift with the Teen Titans, if I'm correct, Batman said as Reaper rose to his feet and walked into the darkness. Wait. Robin exclaimed as Reaper came to a halt. Why don't you stick around? We could benefit from having someone like you on the team. Reaper laughed amusedly and resumed going. I'll be in touch, he murmured before disappearing into the shadows. City of Jump. Rio strolled into Titan's Tower's main room and discovered Zatanna dozing on the couch, as if she was expecting her. Rio went over to Zatanna and quickly made 2 cups of coffee, then laid the cups down before gently shaking her awake. Zatanna sat up, groggily opening her eyes and looking at Rio's beaming face. When did you get here? Zatanna inquired, rubbing her eyes. Just a minute ago, Rio explained as she handed Zatanna her cup. I barely managed to beat the remains of Savitar out of my head with the others before coming here. Did you eat anything before falling asleep? Nothing tasted good, Zatanna observed nonchalantly as she drank from the cup, but this coffee is really good. It's pretty hot though, isn't it? Rio inquired gently. It sure is, Zatanna answered, smiling. There's just one problem, Rio explained, that's iced coffee in your cup. As Rio gazed at the floor, Zatanna froze as she dropped the cup and spilt the contents. How long have you been without a soul? She inquired, drawing a puzzled look from Zatanna. What are you talking about? Zatanna inquired, attempting to diffuse the tension. Losing your sense of taste is a sign of soul absence, Rio stated grimly, along with not being able to sleep and losing your sense of touch. I know you pretended to sleep earlier. She slammed her fist into Zatanna's leg, but the girl didn't flinch. How long have you been without your soul? Rio challenged more strongly. Since just before you got that wall put up in your mind, Zatanna said. That's nothing to give up your very soul for, Rio exclaimed as she stood up. I was worried about, Zatanna exclaimed as she rose to her feet, I couldn't stand seeing you destroy yourself. Does your father even know about this? Rio inquired. Don't bring my father into this, shouted Zatanna before Rio turned and exited. Where are you going? Rio shouted back as she stormed by Starfire, Raven, and Cyborg, I'm going to get your damn soul back from death. They were all staring at Zatanna, who slumped down and sobbed into her hands. Rio walked inside her room and grimaced in the dim light before turning on her bedside lamp. I know you can hear me, Rio demanded emphatically, show me your face, Death. Rio turned around when she heard a sigh behind her and saw Death reclining against the wall. I can't do that, Death responded to Rio, I can't return her soul. Bullshit, Rio snarled, you have the power to take souls and you could just as easily give them back. That's not how it works, Death answered, shaking her head. Once a deal is struck with a member of the Endless, it's impossible to undo it. Rio snatched Death's throat and squeezed her against the wall. You're going to return it right now, Rio scowled. She grimaced as a rifle cocked behind her. Hello, Sasuke, Rio said as Reaper pressed the rifle against Rio's head. You didn't have to come, Death remarked as she disappeared from Rio's grasp and reappeared behind Reaper. I'm really sorry, Naruto. Rio left through a boom tube after the pair vanished. After 5 hours, anyone see Rio? Cyborg inquired as he entered with some pizza. You don't think she went off again? Starfire inquired. I don't think so, Raven replied as Cyborg placed the pizza in the midst of them all. She promised that girl she wouldn't do anything like she did before again. Feeling terrible, Zatanna began biting her nails just as the phone in Cyborg's arm rang. Hello? He inquired as he responded. It's me, Rio said from the other end, and I'll be gone for the rest of the day. Something happened to Mina, and I'm just here to make sure she's okay. Rio. Zatanna began. We'll talk as soon as I get back, Zatanna, she promised, adding, I'll see you all at training tomorrow. Rio sighed as she hung up the phone and turned to face the man in front of her. Back to business, she said, staring him in the eyes. I cancelled my deal with Konsu so I could do this. In terms of words, I give you my soul in exchange for you restoring Zatanna's. Do we have an agreement? Rio took the man's hand as he grinned and extended his palm, her eyes now flashing with flames. To be continued.
That's it for this podcast. Thanks for listening to this video. If you did enjoy this part of the story, like, share, and subscribe for more. And thank you all for helping support, and have a great day.